Greetings, Safe to Serve International. Greetings, first-time viewers. I'm your host, Andrew Henriquez. As you can see clearly, we are in a different location, different time zone, same message, same urgency. And today I want to address a breaking news that's actually trending right now on social media. I'm going to be addressing discrimination against Seventh-day Adventist employees. Many of them are now hearing from their employers, "You are fired." And I'm going to address how these things are signs of the last days. Let's get right into it. This was ran by several articles, several news outlets. The headline reads, IOP, and many of you know IOP is the International House of Pancakes. IOP to pay settlement to employee who was forced to work on Sundays and was fired. An IOP restaurant chain will pay $40,000 to a former employee who was forced in 2021 to work on Sundays in violation of his religious beliefs. Now, I want to be very clear at the very inception of this important presentation. I do not support Sunday worship now, nor when it becomes law. However, I do support religious freedom for every single person on this earth. And I do support and promote that employers should grant their employees religious accommodation. And there are several reasons why I take the stance, and many others do not support that stance. Number one, it is biblical, because the Lord does not force any one of us to worship, any one of us to serve him. In the book of Joshua 24 and verse 15, the prophet, the leader of Israel, actually said, "Choose you this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." And secondly, the prophet Elijah on Mount Carmel said to Israel and all the host of Baal worshippers with Jezebel, "How long halt you between two opinions? If the Lord be God, then serve him. If Baal, serve him." The third reason why I take the stance is simply found in the Declaration of Independence here in America, which clearly says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. That's it. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Let that sink in. That all men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And fourthly, I take the stance because of the principles laid out in the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which clearly states, Congress shall make no law establishing or respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Now, I want you all to note the 14th Amendment, which says, no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection, underscore that, the equal protection of the laws. As I read that article of this IOP chain who has now been found on the wrong side of the law and has now been given the instruction by the court to pay this employee, my mind drew this conclusion, that this particular ruling and other rulings coming from the courts in America on the same issue appear to be in contradiction to the laws of the land. I'll give you 4 quick examples. Do you recall several months ago I touched on the hotel dishwasher employee? 2 lines. In 2019, 60-year-old Haitian immigrant Marie Jean-Pierre, she was awarded, catch this, $21 million in punitive damages because she was fired from her job. Why? She chose not to work on Sunday. The court gave her this award. Secondly, you have heard me cover this before. Amazon delivery employee was awarded $50,000 in 2022. Why? He chose not to work on Sunday. And his boss, employer, fired him. The court gave him that award. Thirdly, USPS delivery employee in 2023, his name was Gerald Groff, refused to work on Sunday, delivering packages. His employer fired him. And that case was brought to the appeals court. He was actually denied in his petition. He brought his case to the highest court of the land, SCOTUS. SCOTUS accepted the case and we're told headline, SCOTUS rules in favor of Christian postal worker in unanimous religious freedom decision. That means all 9 justices on the highest court of the land gave him that award. Now, number 4, here's where I'm actually confirming that these rulings from these courts seem and appear to run contrary to the laws of the land, talking about equal protection of the law of the land. All men are created equal. This is the 4th evidence. New York Post ran the article. Washington Post ran the article. Newsweek ran and published this following article. As they were mentioning the case with Gerald Groff, they actually wrote this. One case SCOTUS turned down in February 2020 was the case Patterson versus Walgreen Company. It was brought by Darrell Patterson, a Seventh-day Adventist employee of an Orlando pharmacy who lost his job because he would not conduct a training session on a Saturday. And notice, Patterson's petition did not win the 4 votes needed to grant a writ of certiorari to put the case on the court's calendar. In layman terms, they rejected this case. Now, I want to make sure that this case I'm presenting is airtight. Can an employer reject a petition from his employee to have religious accommodation Sabbaths off? The answer is yes. Under what statute? Here is a statute. It's in the law. Undue hardship on the part of the employer. As a result, he can reject that petition from his employee. Here's my point, and please don't miss it. Are we to believe and accept that in the first 3 cases aforementioned, that all those employers did not meet the burden of proof of undue hardship? As a result, those 3 petitioners had their cases heard and were actually awarded, but Walgreen Corporation was able to prove undue hardship, fire Darrell Patterson, a Seventh-day Adventist, and all the courts rejected his appeal, and the highest court of the land, SCOTUS, didn't even choose to hear his case. Is that what we are to believe? That one group proved undue hardship, Walgreen, but the others failed? Is that what we are to believe? Or is there something more to this picture? As we would say colloquially, I smell the rat. This appears suspicious. Let me give you this perspective. Please don't miss this. The conservative justices on the highest court in America, SCOTUS, listen, they wanted to overturn a specific statute in the law that is used by employers to defend their case in rejecting a petition from their employees requesting religious accommodation. Watch this. But the conservative justices chose to do it not on the case of a seventh-day Sabbath keeper employee. No. But on the case of a Sunday keeper employee. And the seventh-day Sabbath keeper employee's case came first. And they rejected it. Friends, these are not my words. This is a secular press making this observation. Washington Post, New York Post, and Newsweek. I'll give you the paragraph. Listen attentively. Washington Post. Members of the court's conservative majority have already expressed interest in overturning the precedent central to Gerald Groff's case. In 2020, the court declined to take the case of a Seventh-day Adventist who was fired after refusing a Saturday shift that his employer Walgreens said was an emergency. Pause right there. That was the actual defense. It was an emergency and we could not change and find someone in time, so we fired him. That was what was held up in court. Now let's continue. While Samuel Alito Jr., joined by Justices Clarence Thomas and Neil Gorsuch, agreed not to accept the case, they said it was time to consider overruling the 1977 decision, which Alito wrote, quote, does not represent the most likely interpretation, end quote, of the statute. So this appears biased, my friends. Think about this before I go any further. Why would they not, since this was already on their minds, before any of these aforementioned cases came to them, why did they not rule it based on the first one that came to them? The Seventh-day Adventist employees case. No, let's pass on that one. And let's hear and rule in favor for a Sunday keeping employees case. I wonder why. Is it because they're all Sunday keepers there on SCOTUS? And those who are not also buy into the Sunday agenda? Friends, I don't want to jump the gun, as we would say colloquially. But I want to say this. Let's wait and see what SCOTUS is going to do next when another case from a Seventh-day Adventist keeper employee comes to them. How are they going to respond? Will they hear the case in the first place? And if so, how will they rule? In favor, or will they be biased and oppose the Seventh-day Adventist? Friends, I'm not sure if you know this, but let me put this nail in a sure place. Do you know that the religious accommodation clause was first entered into law in America by a seventh-day Sabbath keeper, and he was a U.S. senator. His name, Jennings Randolph. He was so influential that when he brought this clause, this statute to be voted upon on the Senate floor, we're told the whole Senate unanimously voted in favor to put that clause, and that came into being in the year 1970. 1972. It was added to the 1964 Civil Rights Law. And that can be found in the articles I'm actually reading from. But friends, remember what's coming. So right now we're seeing the courts, the judges, we're now seeing SCOTUS rejecting the cases of a Seventh-day Adventist. I'm going to come to others. Just stay tuned. Allow me to make this point. In order for Christ to be crucified, the Jewish apostate leaders and people, they needed a judge, a governor. Pilate. In Daniel 3, to force everyone to worship falsely, Nebuchadnezzar brought in the judges of the land. Daniel 3, verse 1 through verse 6. Focus on verse 2 and verse 3. And remember, these courts are saying no to SDAs, but yes to Sunday keeping cases. That's the case we will accept and rule in favor for Sunday keeping. Do you remember how I have been hammering, emphasizing for the past several months? Statements from Project 2025, statements from Christian nationalists, statements from dominionists, statements from Kevin Roberts, Stephen Wolfe, Jennings, Jonathan Berry, and others who are actually saying we are only promoting one Sabbath, and that is Sunday. And when the question was asked of the Christian nationalists and the Project 2025 personnel, spokesperson, and even the Heritage Foundation, they actually said, when they were asked, are you going to make sure that you accommodate Seventh-day Adventists? What was the responses? No, we cannot tolerate every religion. We're only promoting Sunday as the day of rest. So we're hearing this from church folk who are going to influence lawmakers. And remember, Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Societies are the organization who are behind the justices that sit on the bench at SCOTUS. They are the ones actually giving names to the president to appoint the federal judges from the lower courts district all the way up to the appellate courts. Only Sunday we are promoting. Let that sink in. And friends, this is prophetic, because remember, just before the Exodus down there in Egypt, Pharaoh forced the people, forced the Israelites, the Hebrews, to work on the seventh-day Sabbath. And the Bible is clear. The account of Moses shall be repeated just before the second coming of Christ. That's First Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11 through verse 12. And you can begin in verse 1. And also chapter 15 of Revelation, verse 1 through verse 3. What happened there is going to be repeated in the time of the mark of the beast. That's Bible. You know I'm going to give you spirit of prophecy. Hear what this statement says. The time will come when men will not only forbid Sunday work, but they will try to force men to labor on the Sabbath. That's a nail in a sure place. And men will be asked to renounce the Sabbath and to subscribe to Sunday observance or forfeit their freedom and their lives. Now, anytime I am building a case to convince, persuade, and to call people to action, I'm going to pull from various exhibits and evidences to confirm the point. Earlier, I mentioned Darrell Patterson and SDA, rejected by the courts, right? Now watch this. Another Seventh-day Adventist, even more recent. This is headline coming, by the way, I'll post the links in the description. Headline reads, let's see what is coming for God's people in the last days. It says a Brooklyn cop, Brooklyn, New York, a Brooklyn cop and Seventh-day Adventist mother was derided as a quote-unquote scammer after she requested to be off on Saturdays to worship based on a lawsuit. When she signed on to the job in 2016, Joanne St. Jean claims she was told she'd be able to adhere to her faith. Instead, she spent the next 8 years being chastised by superiors who allegedly told her, quote, "You are not Jewish. Why are you practicing like you're Jewish?" End quote. Think about that. Think about what's coming for us, SDA people, in the last days. What innuendos, what criticisms are we going to meet? It shows ignorance on the part of these employers, because we know the seventh-day Sabbath is not a Jewish day of rest. The Jews kept it, but it is biblical, based on God's word. All right, let's take a look. Let's continue. The bosses told St. John, quote, "There is no place for you in this police department because of your religion." Can you see what's coming for SDA people? Not only we won't be able to buy or sell at a particular point when the mark of the beast is in force, but we are going to be terminated, fired from our jobs, because we honor the biblical day of rest, the seventh day of the week, commonly called Saturday, not Sunday. She was granted religious accommodations to have her required days off, but bosses told her, or the cops were angry, a newbie would get a weekend day, and began criticizing her beliefs. Quote, "I don't understand your religion," one boss told her based on court records. "Your religion is messed up." A supervisor also said her religion was, quote, "not for Black people," end quote. And she started being assigned duties to work on the Saturdays. Imagine what's coming. It has already begun. So many of us are looking for various crises, persecutions in the far off future. They have already begun. That same year, her bosses decided she was absent without leave on a Saturday and sent Nassau County police officers to her Long Island home to, quote unquote, harass her. Quote, "When the officers arrived, they informed her that she was AWOL and stated that her supervisors had not been able to reach her," the lawsuit states. This was preposterous, as plaintiff was off on that Saturday. In practice, officers like Joanne St. Jean or St. Jean are denied advancement within the department and openly harassed for asserting their religious beliefs. Think about that. Now, I want to draw a stark contrast. When she was hired, she said to her employer, "I cannot work on my Sabbath, that Saturday." And she was granted accommodation and later on persecuted. And what happened? The courts rejected her appeal. Look at the opposite. Do you recall my opening breaking news article? I'll give you one paragraph. Watch the contrast. At the time of hire, the IOP employee requested, and his request was granted, to have a religious accommodation, that he would not work on Sundays to honor his religious observances. After a change in management in 2021, the new general manager expressed hostility toward the accommodation and required the employee to work on Sunday. April 25th, Sunday, May 9. And afterwards, as he stood for his Sunday worship, he was fired. Now watch, he appealed. And the courts upheld his appeal, but not the Seventh-day Adventist. Beloved, we saw what happened. Why are we not preparing for what is soon to break upon us as an overwhelming surprise? And that's why it's time to implement the 5 keys of survival. I'll give you one more point and close. And let this be a nail in their coffin, a nail in a sure place. What happened during the pandemic for 3.5 years? What happened? Do you realize those policies actually restricted not only movement, but also employment? How many folks were forced to go against their conscience in order to hold a job, secure their employment? Imagine what is to break upon this world as an overwhelming surprise. So while we are thinking of an event in the future, which is the fulfillment of chapter 13 of Revelation, verse 11, America will speak as a dragon. America will force people to worship on Sunday, verse 12, verse 15 through verse 17. We have already begun to see this. A transformation is taking place in America from bad to worse. What stood out to you? Those of you who made the sacrifice to join me live at this moment in time. As you go to rest in a few moments from now, let what you have heard leave an indelible mark upon your minds. Those of you who are employees, if you were released, if you were terminated from your employment on tomorrow because of your stance on biblical health, because of your stance on biblical worship, and on any other biblical principles of faith, what would you do? It may not come tomorrow, but we know it's coming very soon. For the desire of ages, page 121 says, those who stand for God will see every earthly support cut off. The 3 Hebrews were set over the affairs of Babylon. Daniel 3 verse 12, and because they refused to bow down and worship falsely, what happened? They were relieved of their duties. But as they stood for God, God stood for them. By God's grace, I'll see you tomorrow. Put in the comments below what point stood out to you. Like and share the video so others can be warned, instructed, encouraged in these last days. The Lord is soon to come, and the protest continues.